Hello, welcome back to Bob's Little Sports Shop Archery Range. I'm Jeremiah, and today we're going to be talking about some other release styles and how to safely operate them and properly operate them so we get a good shot. First one I'm going to go over is your standard wrist strap release style. I say standard because this is very, very common, especially for beginners, but also even into professional competitive levels. These are very, very popular. So this one, as you can see, it's got a spring-loaded trigger. So when I pull the trigger, it opens. When I let go of the trigger, it closes. Simple as that. When you put these on, it's you clamp them down like a belt loop, and you want to make sure if you're wearing any kind of accessories like a watch or something, you want to make sure that your wrist strap is in front of the watch, right here, instead of behind your watch or whatever accessory you might wear on your wrist, because you don't want to tear it off when you're drawing the bow back. So with this style, we hook onto the loop like that. If I wanted to, I could draw the bow back without even holding on to this, although that's not recommended. But it's a very, very secure connection. Holds onto my wrist really well. It's very safe in that respect. When we draw these back, what we'll want to do is we just put our index finger right there behind it. You always point the trigger towards your fingers, not towards your thumb. And so when you draw back, you keep your finger behind the trigger. I like to put it between the first and second knuckles of my index finger, right there. Because what happens is for a lot of people, they'll draw like this, and when you get back to full draw, your trigger ends up like this. And then they're trying to find their trigger like that when they grip it between the second and third knuckles. So I say between the first and second knuckles like that. This is nothing like pulling the trigger on a rifle or any kind of firearm. A lot of people misunderstand that and they think that it is, but it's not. So don't use the pad of your finger or anything like that. You're gonna completely curl over the trigger. And then what you do is you try to slip out of that wrist strap. You won't be able to if it's put on properly, but the idea is to relax your hand. And so if my hand is tense like this, but when I relax my hand, you can see my hand slips into the release a little bit. It actually gives a little bit more length. And that little bit of length is gonna be enough to set the trigger off. So when we do that, hands over it like this, we relax our hand, and what happens is the shot goes off. You don't wanna punch the trigger. This is very bad. What that's gonna do is when you pull that trigger, when you pull it like this, you're gonna jerk the string. When you jerk the string's gonna go off, your arrow's gonna go off. You're not gonna be able to really hit anything. So, or at least not accurately. So, you'll wanna take your time, relax, and pull through that trigger until it pops off. And that's gonna be the best way to not anticipate the shot with this style of release. So what that's gonna look like, this. Draw all the way back, come into anchor, wrap over the trigger, and just relax. And we pull through the shot, okay? The reason why my hand goes back like that is because I'm pulling on my wrist, not on the trigger. So my finger is wrapped over the trigger, but I'm pulling on my wrist. So it pops off like that. That's a good follow through. That's what you're supposed to do with a wrist strap release. And this one in particular is the TrueFire Smoke fold back edition. So this one actually can fold down like this, so it's out of your way. This is a great starter release. These usually run around $60. Next release we're gonna talk about, this is a thumb trigger style release. This one is the B3 Exit. This is their thumb trigger. There's a lot of different variations of a thumb trigger release. This one in particular, you have to manually close that hook onto the D-loop. There are some models where the locking button to lock the release down is the same button that you use to actually close it, so it'll be the same mechanism. So what you'll do is when you're pushing the button to lock it, as you're pushing the button, this will go down and lock. So some of them are more ergonomic than others. And then the other thing, there's also some where you operate everything from from the trigger where you can close it and open it from the trigger. And there's also some with a spring style dual caliber, similar to the wrist strap release that we saw earlier. So this is just one of many variants of a thumb trigger. So as I mentioned before, when we're shooting, we have to manually lock it down like that. And this is going to be a dexterity thing. So with any thumb trigger, or with a lot of thumb triggers, it's a dexterity thing. So you really have to kind of develop the hand coordination to do that. For a lot of people, it's going to be difficult. So like if it's locked like this, press the trigger, flick it open, put it on there and lock it, and then you can draw it back. Or you can just leave it like that until you're ready to shoot. But it's a dexterity thing. There's really one out there for everyone. So if there's one you don't like, try out a couple more. Anyway, with this style, what we have to do, this is our trigger here. And so pressing that trigger is gonna open that hook. So with this style, we can shoot it in a couple different ways. Ideally, the best way to shoot a release is gonna be using some kind of backwards tension, or at least one of the more recommended ways to shoot, I should say. Most releases is going to be with some kind of backwards tension, and not jumping, or I should say not punching the trigger. That's not really recommended, just like in the case of the wrist strap release that we saw earlier. Now we can shoot this similar to a hinge style, and here, in which case what we would do is we would use a rotating motion. And how we would do this is when you draw, you want to make sure that that trigger is outside your hand, just like that. And then when you come to full draw, the way that you would shoot with like a hinge style is you would wrap your thumb over the trigger. And this is going to be a common theme with any trigger style release. Wrap over the trigger. And then in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to pull down on the ring finger. And what we'll do is basically what we're doing is we're tensing up our hand. And when we close our hand, you can see that trigger comes up. So all I'm doing is I'm blocking it with my thumb, and when I close my hand, what happens is the trigger presses. And again, this is still something you can jerk, either jerk the string or you can punch the trigger, so you gotta be careful still. You still wanna make sure you take your time and just slowly squeeze your hand, and it'll pop right off. That's one of the ways. The other way you can do it, and this is another popular way to shoot a thumb trigger, is again wrapping your thumb over the trigger, at full draw. And then what you do is you're gonna relax your hand and let it stretch, similar to with the wrist strap. We relax our hand, but we got our thumb over the trigger. So when I relax, you can see my hand stretches, but my thumb's gonna stay rigid in place. And so it pops off with a slight movement. And again, our follow through is gonna be backwards. It's gonna be backwards this way and not like this or this. It's not jerking either direction. It's gonna be back because we're using minimal movement and we have the tension backwards. So this is what this is gonna look like. So first with the hinge style. That. And then more of a back tension style. You can see it's minimal movement and the follow through is back. So that's what we want, it's exactly what we want. That's how to safely operate a thumb trigger. Just make sure you keep your thumb off that trigger. With any handheld, it's always a possibility if you bump that trigger that it could go off, punch yourself in the mouth. It's not a fun sight to see. Just try to be safe when you're using handhelds, and that's how you use a thumb trigger. Thanks for watching. That's gonna be how you safely and properly operate a thumb trigger and a index trigger style release. If you have any questions or you have any recommendations or videos you'd like to see, leave a comment below, give us a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to our page. Thank you.